So good morning, everyone. I'd now like to call to order this meeting of the Human Resources, Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. I've been advised that a quorum is present and it's appropriate to proceed. So just a few admin notes. I'd like to welcome everyone that's joining the meeting today and also remind you that open session of today's meeting is being recorded. Deputy Mayor Malik sends her regrets. Council is in session today. Also, a big welcome to Jeannie and Drew. Thank you, our other directors, for joining us today. Greatly appreciated. And also at the conclusion of our meeting, we will have a directors only session. So I would ask all directors to stay in attendance for the meeting. So just moving on to our land acknowledgement, as is our custom.
Wendy, just so you know, I decided, it's Jack, I decided to come.
Jack's on as well.
Yay, Jack. Yeah. Okay. Our chair has joined us too. Well, that's wonderful.
And Wendy, Paul's in the meeting as well.
And I'm also here too, Wendy.
Paul and Leslie as well.
Yay. Well, welcome. Thank you, Leslie.
Coordinating.
Okay, well, sorry we ended up starting 9 minutes late. That's historically late. So I'm going to bomb through the first bits of admin and also make sure that we've got time for a directors only session at the end. So greatly appreciated. We've got some good reports from management today too. So we'll commence with a land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is covered by the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. Okay, so the first item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting? Is there a mover? Thank you, Raul. Seconder? I can't see Paul, but I'm sure he is there. I'm going to just try and see if I can do a view all.
Oh, sorry. I second. I'm good.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Hearing no objections, the meeting agenda is approved. Next, item 3, declaration of conflict of interest. I now ask if there's any conflicts of interest to be declared. None declared. Thank you. We can move on to the business of the meeting. Okay, so item 4, the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of September 14th, 2023. May I please have a motion to approve the September 14th, 2023 meeting open session minutes? Is there a mover? Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Paul.
I second.
Thank you, Paul. So moved. And now I'm going to just take a little bit of time because we have an ESG update from Lisa Taylor. And we intend to take this matter generally as read, but I would ask Lisa to briefly highlight any matters that she wishes to bring to our attention. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Wendy, and good morning, everyone. So just to give a couple of quick highlights on what's new this quarter with our ESG dashboard. From the E, environment, and G, governance perspective, we have continued to focus on education and awareness, most recently at our October all-in staff town hall, where we engaged with employees on how we can embed climate considerations into our everyday jobs, as well as launching an internal sustainability knowledge sharing platform for our staff to continue that learning journey. And then under the S, social, and as Rose has noted in her report, we launched our first diversity, equity, and inclusion fundamentals training for all staff in mid-September. And finally, we've recently initiated an internal audit in line with our Farm Committee's approved internal audit plan that's focused on accessibility and Waterfront Toronto's compliance with the AODA requirements, which become in full effect from January 1st, 2025. Happy to answer any questions, Wendy.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? Raul?
Just a quick one. Lisa, I always appreciate these updates. The conversation that you had with management around ESG awareness, could you just tell us a little bit more? And where my mind's going to a little bit is the ESG conversation that can be politicized, that can be quite complicated at times, but some organizations focus on the impact that E, S, and G will have on their organization. And some organizations will focus on the impact that the organization has on E, S, and G. And I'm just wondering how those two fit into the conversation your team's having.
For sure. We focus on both. The conversation that we had at the staff town hall was around both. It was about the fact that our supply chain contributes 95% of the carbon emissions, Waterfront through our construction projects and the different vendors that we engage. So we talked about how we can engage our supply chain or use our supply chain to reduce those emissions. And then we talked about our own carbon footprint and how we're moving to T3 Bayside, and that timber building is in itself going to reduce our carbon footprint, particularly that we are reducing our space that we're using by about 25%. So we are actively engaged at the staff level. We've also had sessions with our senior management team where we've talked about those matters, but also about ESG reporting, where we've gone out and as noted in Cameron's report shortly, about how we went out to stakeholders, which includes 6 different groups of stakeholders, about a materiality assessment and what, from an ESG perspective, our stakeholders are interested in hearing about us from as well. So it's both clear, and I hope that gives a little bit of a flavor of some of the conversations and topics we're talking about.
And Lisa, if I can just add, we've also had third-party consultants walk our staff through all of the different ESG considerations, et cetera. So, and training for our staff.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've actually got an accounting of our GHG emissions from our construction projects as an input to those conversations we're having on that side of things.
Got it. And just on the flip side of that, then, are we building in climate change into the risk profile as well?
Absolutely. Climate change is in the top 5 of our risks on our risk register. So it's there and it's tracked, and it's one of our top risks that we're mitigating against.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Any further questions for Lisa? Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on to Rose. And again, our VP of Human Resources has provided her written report. So we'll take this as read, but any updates, questions, or comments for Rose? Rose, is there anything you'd like to touch on?
Sure, Wendy, thank you. As Wendy said, I'll take the report as read, but just want to give everyone clarity and confirmation that we continue to move our HR strategies forward on recruitment, employee relations, succession management, which you'll hear more about in the directors only session, and as Lisa mentioned, DE&I. But the hot topic right now in our organization, of course, is the office move. We continue to get this office ready, packed up, and either scan documents or packed up material to go out, furniture and what have you. We've elected move champions, thanks to Kevin Green, who's helping us lead this sort of office organization of moving over to T3. The idea is that we're going to be moving over obviously at the end of the month because our lease comes up on December 31st. We're preparing staff to get all excited for moving over to T3. George, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, we'll be taking staff on a tour so that they can actually see the facilities as they're getting close to being ready. And I would just re-emphasize the fact that, you know, we made this choice as a strategic move to point out that we are developing that East End and that we're willing to invest ourselves in that strategic positioning. So, you know, we'll get a better sense in January as we start to move in, and then continue to encourage people to, quite frankly, occupy further space in those buildings.
Thank you, George. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rose. Any questions for Rose? Okay, then I think we will move on to the Stakeholder Relations Report with Cameron. And again, we'll take this as read, but Cameron's been active defining some new categories, and I think this will be very interesting to hear from him now because all directors have had various questions on this. And I think also, Cameron, it would be a great idea to share with directors the very successful boat tour with the mayor and George Brown on November 7th. And, you know, it was an outstanding event. And I think bringing together the government and public and private sector to have that kind of session was very effective. So if you could touch on both of those, please, I think that would be terrific.
Well, thank you, Wendy. And I think you've really hit the fundamental point, and that is that maintaining good stakeholder relations, making them durable and trusting is really a team sport. And you saw that in evidence on the boat tour on Tuesday. For those who were there, wide range of stakeholders from the development community, from academia, from the city, and a tremendous media representation as well. So it was quite extraordinary, and it just does remind me it is a team sport. And so why that my name is next to this report is in no way reflective that it's Cameron that does this. It's an enterprise-wide effort.
Although I'm going to jump in
Yeah.
and just thank Cameron and his team who helped organize this right from the beginning. So George Brown and our staff worked together to help deliver that. And you got that feedback of the success from the dialogue of all the individuals on that boat. It was very successful.
It was
So I
successful.
just want to say
And
thank you,
we
Cameron.
thank our former director, Joe Cressy, as
Cressy,
well for helping organize it. With respect to the report, just a few items that I would just bring to your attention. This is our second year reporting in this style or in this manner at this particular meeting in November. And there are sort of 4 items that are maybe noteworthy. One is we've broken out this year media and employees into their own categories. Media was absent as a category last year, and Rahul suggested, and I think very wisely suggested, we create it as its own category, so we've done so. Also, employees were previously embedded in what we call the community category, but we're seeing this intensification of and the challenge of recruiting employees and retaining them. And we of course have this upcoming office move that Rose and George just referenced, and that's a disruptive and sometimes stressful undertaking. So we think that the employees deserve to have their own category, and there's intensive work being done again around employee engagement. Third is that was just mentioned, we have a kind of a new diagnostic in the form of the ESG materiality assessment, which was undertaken in May of this year by a firm called the Works. So we have kind of a quantitative and a bit of a qualitative indication of the priority topics from an ESG perspective that our stakeholders have, and then kind of how we tack next to them. And it helps us to be a bit prescriptive, because I think we have an opportunity to expand some of those topics, particularly, as the report said, into the housing space, which is a secondary consideration with our stakeholders, but it's one that is very important to the future of this organization. And so we will be undertaking efforts to involve ourselves more in that issue space and developing and cultivating stakeholder relations in that. Fourth would be that we saw a lot of changes to the senior ranks of the public service at all levels of government in 2023. We have a new mayor and a new federal minister of infrastructure. But again, as Tuesday's boat tour reminded us, we have one of as our core competencies, this facility to convene, and that's not inconsequential or insignificant. And so if we're going to meet the challenge that Wendy heard and all of us heard on the boat from the mayors, that we need to have all stakeholders and all orders of government behind the expansion of the LRT, that's a job that we can certainly help play in convening all of those parties so we can get the LRT built a timely way. And then finally, in that sort of spirit, we've confirmed that we will be touring the provincial minister of infrastructure through the Portlands, through the East Bayfront, and to T3 next Friday. And she and her deputy may be joined by the provincial minister of environment as well. So we've got momentum. I was a bit disruptive with changes in the senior public servants and of course office holders, but I feel that we have pretty good momentum with our certainly our government stakeholders, and things are settling in. So that.
The only thing I would add is that Christina and Ed, unfortunately, we had our meeting with the federal government at the same time as the boat tour, so Jack and I had to step out of that. But Christina and Ed had some excellent meetings with the staff at the federal level.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Are there any questions for Cameron? I hope I can see everybody. If I don't see anything right now, but if
We'll let you know if there's a hand up.
Okay, that's great. I would just like to add that as a director, as a city appointee, I did find it to be a very positive hearing from, the various sectors talking about how critical our role is in terms of project delivery. And it just seemed to gel. And the idea of having the mayor there, and of course, Deputy Mayor Malik, who's very supportive, it just was sort of moving this along in the most positive way. And I thought that was terrific on Tuesday. So well done. And it was exciting to hear the mayor, confirm that the funding for the Waterfront LRT. So it felt like a sort of finally and a great celebration. So thank you very, very much to all of you, and also to Joe Cressy, who was outstanding.
Wendy, if I can just add, I also had time to talk to the mayor and what kind of got her through as we were on the boat. I did raise the prospect of having her meet with the board.
Yes.
If she's interested in doing that, so I'll be following up on behalf of the board to do that.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much. So moving on now to the governance document review, you will recall that the mandate of the HRGSR committee requires that we review our key governance documents on an annual basis. We did do a lot of this work in 2020 and 2021, and work closely with Barry Ryder, our counsel, on this. But I will pass this over to Ian to go through, because we do have these 14 documents that we do take a rigorous review, and we certainly would like your involvement in this process in coming weeks. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks very much, Wendy. And I apologize, I have to work remotely today, so I hope everything is clear. Wendy, can I just ask you, when we finish this item, can we circle back on item 4D, which is the HR practices and policies? I don't know whether Rose has any comments, but I think if there may be some questions on that when we get to. But in terms of the document review, as you will see, that in front of you on the screen is the list of our key governance documents. The full text of each of the agreements is available to directors on our board portal, Board Effects. As Wendy noted, each of these documents had a major overhaul a couple of years ago, in particular through 20 and 2021. They were approved by the board in 2021. The review was done by management, by directors, and by external counsel. And under the mandate and of course best practices, it's appropriate to consider these documents on an annual basis, and whether any changes are required. I've spoken to external counsel who confirmed that in his view, the materials from 2 years ago were very thorough, still reflect best practices, and nothing has come to his attention that would necessitate, or at least that he would say are learnings that the developments over the past 2 years. He said, one area where we're starting to see changes is with ESG, but he also noted that we are dealing with that in an extensive way, and we heard from Lisa earlier in this meeting on that. We've previously stated that the documents should be reviewed in depth on a periodic basis. We've talked about 3 or 4 years basis. So subject to this input from this committee and the board, we would propose that we would undertake a thorough review either next year or the year after, at least a more detailed deep dive. For this year, what we're suggesting is that we were proposed to seek input from board members and from senior management to identify any changes over the next couple of weeks, and then to bring those forward for consideration at the December 7 board meeting. We're happy to work with directors on that. I would note that we have received one comment relating to the code of conduct, and that some of the defined terms may be a bit too broad and catch things that are not intended, so we can review that. So I would propose, Wendy, that we would solicit comments from management and from directors. If this committee agrees, we can send out communication later today or tomorrow, encouraging directors to identify anything that they think requires attention. And we'd be happy to work with directors over the next couple of weeks. And I know external counsel is also prepared to answer any questions that might come up, or deal with any issues that might come up. So subject to any comments or questions, I don't think I have anything else to say about the process or the documents at this point in time. but I'm happy to receive any comments.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Raul?
Sure. Now, Ian, that makes sense. Just a quick question. How would you propose to batch these? Because my guess is that you probably don't want everybody reviewing all of them and going back to the general bylaw. Doesn't probably suit purposes. But the game plan be to send, like the mandates of the committees to the respective committee members and a couple of the others. What's your thinking there?
Well, I'm sure.
Which is what we did before, right? I mean, we sent it through committees to review those relevant to their committee.
Yes. So, okay. Well, Rahul, I think you're right. The focus of, on the farm mandate is going to be farm committee members because they're closer to it. I wouldn't want to exclude comments from other people. I mean, there's some fairly general comments such as documents such as the mandate of the board chair, CEO, corporate secretary. And I would not want to discourage comments on those, a confidentiality agreement, et cetera. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but I think I would actually want to at least solicit comments on all the documents. I'm not going to send an email with whatever they are, 200 pages worth of materials, but rather just create a link to the documents and welcome any. Typically, over the last couple of years, as we do I'll call it the lighter touch review, it's gone to committee chairs. And I would raise this at the committee meetings that are upcoming next week and the week after, and solicit views at that point in time as well. I'm open to suggestions, but if you think it's overwhelming of directors to ask them to comment on all 14 documents, I'm happy to dial it back. I don't want to discourage comments because they may come from any source.
Here's a suggestion. I think we're probably all saying the same thing. My gut tells me you send out a link to 14 heavy corporate, governance documents. People's eyes are going to glaze over and you're not going to get perhaps the quality of responses you want. And I think you're thinking of batching it somehow. I'll leave it to you to figure out how you want to do that, but not to direct you too much, but maybe you want to call a couple of your colleagues, at some of the other organizations and say, hey, look, how did you typically do that?
Sure.
That got you, meaningful responses. I mean, one opportunity would be literally to extend this process and not try to do it all at once and batch it over the next 3 quarters. And that way you've actually got response, but that might not fit the timeline.
Well, you know what? That's actually how we approved it. We approved it in 2 batches. One was in I think the March meeting of 2021, and the other was in the October meeting, I believe, of 2021. So we can certainly do that. Quite frankly, I think my focus is on the confidentiality and the code of conduct, because I think that one I want to make sure people are comfortable with. So that's a very good suggestion. And maybe things like the mandates we leave to the committees. And you're right. I can't imagine too many people are going to be reviewing our general bylaw number 1.
And I'm not sure you want the board reviewing those.
Sure. I mean, they are board documents. They set forth some like, especially the open meeting law, etc. But fair enough. Fair comment. You know what, Rahul? Maybe I'm happy to circle back with you if you wish, and as I say, I'm happy to talk to the other organizations as well and see what's worked for them. But point noted for sure.
And I think Raul, this is very helpful because I've been saying to Ian, what is the process so that we get, we actually have engagement with directors and we give them an opportunity rather than having all 14 documents just be there on board effect and it's up to them to, wade through them all. So I think if we can prioritize, so sure. My suggestion would be, Ian, that we regroup with Raul and do a bit of a phased approach, because I think it could be quite effective. And then that way as well, it's a refresher for directors to look at some of the most important documents as well.
Sure.
Does that make sense for everyone? Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions for Ian? Oh, Raul?
Just a quick follow-up, and thanks. Ian sort of raised the other matter that Rose had in her document. And I was actually going to raise it now as well. And that was, Rose provided us a list of a whole bunch of HR guidelines which was very helpful, by the way. It's good to know that we've got those. And my questions to Ian is a little bit around, I believe the board doesn't want to be getting into the weeds on HR guidelines, but policies are a different matter. And some of the things that I saw in that document spoke a little bit to policies. And some of them spoke to a little bit around reputational risk, things like electronic monitoring, the perquisites, that sort of thing. The question is, what's the filter to bring, the guidelines / policies to the board, and which ones don't come to the board?
Rose, maybe you want to speak to historical practice. Those ones are the ones that Rose has listed, and Charmaine, maybe you can switch to that section of the materials.
Yes, so we're moving back to 4D, which unfortunately I skipped, so my apologies. I was just trying to catch up here.
Yeah, no. Fair,
With our
fair
technical
comment.
difficulties.
And I'm sorry, I just
Not a problem. Sure.
So historically, the 40 listed on page 19 of the material are all, you're absolutely right. And I think you made mention to this last year. We bring this list and we update the committee members on an annual basis. We try to refine them and revise them as required. And we are looking at breaking these up between practice and guidelines. We've never really used the word policy here. We use the word guideline. I think we mentioned that, but we're trying to refine them. But you're right, we don't necessarily bring them to the board for approval. We bring them for information, which is why on an annual basis, if you look at page 18, we've outlined the ones that either we've revised this past year or that we've incorporated newly. We also look at new laws coming out. The electronic monitoring was put forward last year because of the new law. Sorry, the number escapes me right now. Bill 88, it's in my report. I should have just read that particularly. So we always keep an eye out. For example, the AOTA ones we've just updated based on new information you got, which will play really well into our internal review that's going on right now. So we don't bring them to the board for review, but if there's something that you feel might be missing there, I'm happy to look into it. I hope that answers your question. If not, I can get more information.
No, here's a suggestion. It was really a process question. I'm quite comfortable personally with the nomenclature of guidelines. If they're policies, typically they would come to a board, but separate issue. But perhaps we would leave it to management to determine which of those are material to bring to the committee. So I think it's just a good practice for your perspective that if you think there's something that's got a potential reputational risk to the organization and it's in a guideline, that if you bring it to the committee as an information piece, it's probably useful.
Absolutely. And I think one that I believe we may have brought, and I'd have to go back in my memory bank here, is the disclosure of wrongdoing, which is number 20. That to me is for sure reputational. And we're happy to, if we make changes or if we have to make changes, we'll definitely bring that back.
Yeah. And, one of them sort of jumped out and it's unique is like COVID-19, right?
Right.
You have a whole bunch of guidelines that are very germane to the operations and we don't want to tell you what to do. That's not it. But, from a committee perspective and potentially board, it's good to know what that is.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Super. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Rose and Raul. Are there any other items for Rose at this point? Rose, did you want to point anything else out?
No, actually, thank you, Raul. That was a great segue. What I already said, we just continue to refine them, revise them as required. And if there's anything that maybe any committee member, board members thinks it should be on this list, I'm happy to look into it. I did take the comment seriously last year that, for a small organization, we have a lot, but we muddle the waters between guidelines, practices, and we're trying to split them up as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now item number 7, may I please have a motion to go into closed session to discuss item 8 of today's agenda?
I move it.
Okay, Paul gets to move it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raul. I just want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session needs to be passed when the meeting returns to open session. Thank you very much. So we've now returned to open session and have resumed the recording. There's one resolution arising from the closed session for us to consider. May I please have a motion to approve the September 14th, 2023 committee meeting closed session minutes? Is there a mover?
I move it. Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raul. Okay, so hearing no objections, the minutes are approved. And now we are moving into a motion to terminate the meeting. That was quick, record time.
You caught up.
33 minutes. I know, I
That's
know.
that's
Well,
impressive. That's
oh,
impressive,
good.
Wendy.
Oh,
There you
good. Well,
go.
I just wanted to whip through everything. So having concluded the business of the meeting, I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a mover? And a seconder? Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Paul. Okay, now declare the meeting terminated.